Yeah, and the other aspect of it to consider is, did Kvothe hear Cinder's true name? And it seems like he did.
Oh.
Does that show some ability to name? Like, it seems like, he goes into kind of a sleeping mind state after his parents get killed, when he's in shock. And throughout the rest of the time, it seems like he's kind of like in, his sleeping mind is kind of taken over and is running the show. The fact that he hears Ferula, because when he hears Elxadal call the name of fire, he just hears fire.
Yeah.
So he didn't hear Cinder. He heard Ferula. He heard Cinder's true name. So that could either be just, Rothfuss wasn't thinking, which I don't.
That's really interesting.
Right. I think it's likely that it's an example of Kvothe having some major fucking power. That he was, Haliax called Cinder's true name and Kvothe heard it. I think that's an example of his power.
That's really interesting. I hadn't considered the magnitude of what that means for Kvothe, and that really means a lot towards his goal. Yeah, his eventual goal, which is to kill Cinder and all, as many of them as he can. He would be one that would be capable. That's really interesting, man. I hadn't actually considered that. Yeah, what that in effect means. In retrospect, I should have, but this is one of those things, man. That it's a small thing in the moment. It looms large, but in the moment when you're reading it, it's a name, right? And you just kind of you go through it. But yeah, once you make all those connections, and then you also consider that yes, he hears fire when Elxadal says fire. And there's other examples of that too, where you hear, what the word would be instead of what it actually is. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, as the reader, we hear iron when Chronicler ties up Bast. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's a mistake on Rothfuss' part. I think that's a clue to how powerful Kvothe is, and think it's a clue that Kvothe is going to fuck up Cinder in Book 3.
So that also speaks to the utility or the need to present this chapter, this particular situation the way that he did, to awaken the sleeping mind, or to put him in the mode of the sleeping mind. Right, because and he gives those little details in a number of ways. We didn't really point them out, but just they're there, and yeah, that's really interesting, man. Because there's a number of them that does show that is what's happening, and yeah, that's really interesting, man. I hadn't considered that, but yeah, that makes that means a lot, man. That's very important.
Not that he's behind one of the doors, or behind the first door, but you're saying like he's in some kind of a state of like heart of stone kind of a state, or at least some kind of a state, not behind the door.
It's like his sleeping mind is kind of running the show. Like, how Loden talks about like how, your sleeping mind is kind of like the fucking animal instinct side of you. And it seems to be running the show. So when like Haliax is like Ferula, it could be a sign that Kvothe's, animalistic, instinctual side was kind of running the show. So he was actually able to hear his true name rather than to hear Cinder or just hear nothing. And it could show like this power that's inside this kid when he's in a traumatic experience. He's just in shock, and he's able to hear the true name of a truly historic figure in this world. Same as he was able to fucking call Felurian's name when he's in the Fae. Like almost immediately when he meets her, he's able to call her true name. Shows his fucking power. Go ahead, Tim.
So there's a couple of examples where he's leading into that. sleeping mind, my body, this is kind of in the beginning when he's walking through and seeing the gore and bone and blood. My body grew numb. I felt as if I was trying to think through syrup. And then when he sees Cinder for the first time and noticed the goat's eyes and all that, he says, I felt a stab of feeling penetrate the confusion I clutched around me like a thick protective blanket. And something put both its hands deep into my chest and clutched. It may have been the first time in my life I ever was truly afraid. That also reminded me of Loden in terms of how he's able to look into him. But yeah, that speaks to his sleeping mind is running the show. I mean, and there's many other ways where he made it seem, we already talked about it, how it's as if he's in a daze, he's in shock, he's put in a state where he's just kind of moving through this. So
and
that would make
he's
sense.
Like having like an outer body experience where he's reminding himself that he's in shock. Like, so there's one part of his mind trying to tell his actual physical body that is going through the motions, hey, you're in shock, like shaking your shoulder and like, hey, you're in shock. But he's not like running the show. It's almost like the co-pilot is trying to tell you this.
Yeah, he literally says, some small rational part of me realized I was in deep shock. It repeated the fact to me again and again. I used all Ben's training to ignore it. I did not want to think about what I saw. I did not want to know what had happened here. I did not want to know what any of this meant.
So the fact that he's in that state and then he hears Cinder's true name, I think is significant. I think it shows his power, one, and I do think it shows that his sleeping mind had taken over, which I think will play a big role in when he goes into the woods and starts playing his music and he starts playing, when a leaf turns and that kind of stuff. I think it shows some magical aspect to that. I think his sleeping mind had fucking taken control of him and kept control for many years.
Yeah, that's interesting too. So if he's sitting in that sleeping mind state and then weaving these songs for all that time and making these emotions come to life and articulating all these experiences that he's had up to that point in his life, no wonder when he plays that for people, it locks them up.
Yeah. They
just get locked and they just like, it's so great when he writes that stuff. It's so good. It's really fun or cathartic to like sit in that as a reader. I've never read anything like that I can put my finger on personally. Yeah, it's really great. But I hadn't really considered that he's in that sleeping mind state for that long of a period, in which case he exercises through it. So no wonder when he meets a Loden, he's got power. Now, we can always talk about Ilian and, that bloodline and everything, but to be able to practice within it, he doesn't fully understand it. And that's also what's so great about how Rothfuss decides to present this. When he's with the Adem, he's humbled to the effect of like, look, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're just like, and then he tries to actually explain it. And they're like, so what is this? Wait, what is it? He tips his mind into something.
Spinning leaf.
So yeah, it is spinning leaf. Yeah. Where I just stop thinking. And they're like, that's it. That's what you're doing. You're doing what you should be doing. And you're doing much better than what people that train for years do. So yeah, keep doing that. You're cheating that you're doing. Keep cheating.
Yeah.
Like it's great, man. I think this is the muscle memory that he utilizes then that he's developing at this point. That's cool. I hadn't made the connection as deep as that. I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, and so this is where you get that part you were talking about, Fitz, where he's like, make no mistake, I was not myself. At least I was not the same person I had been a span of days before. Everything I did, I attended with my whole mind, leaving no part of me free from remembering. And I don't take that as... I take that as literal, that he literally was not himself. That he was literally a different person because of locking himself behind the doors of forgetting.
Well, and he stresses it in the next sentence where he even says, he looks, or in the next couple sentences where he looks at rain, sun, grass, earth, stones with an intensity of indifference that only grief can promote. So, I mean, intensity of indifference, that's really pushing that that feeling to the edge. So yeah, it's definitely there's an intent, but then again, he laid the groundwork before with those 4 doors. Pretty good writer, this guy, right?
Yeah,
he's pretty good. He's pretty decent at this. Where we already have that connection to make, and now we see it even clearer.
Yeah,
it's great.
Without these 2 chapters, 18 and 19, Kvothe at the bar, it doesn't make any sense. It's only when you come across these chapters and you learn about the 4 doors of forgetting, and the 4 doors for the mind to escape, and him literally saying, "I was not myself. My mind had went to sleep," and like none of Kvothe makes any sense until you put it together with how he acts in Tarbean. And when you see him as a kid acting in Tarbean, then all of a sudden it makes sense that, oh, okay, so he did, something's up with him. It's not an act.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make sense if it's just an act, but now you kind of figure out, like, okay, it's something along these lines that is going on. Something along the same lines that's affecting Haliax and affected him as a kid in Tarbean. Something about these 4 doors, and maybe something to do with changing his name or something like that, or he broke his alar or something like that is affecting him now.
Well, the other thing, one of my biggest takeaways from this chapter as well is his level of musicianship is very much articulated here, because he's going to a level that it's not just this guy's good at playing songs. This guy is creating music in a way that you don't hear about other people trying to create music. They're trying to play songs that sound like other songs they've heard. Or at least that's kind of the way I interpret it. And
yeah, no, I agree. Like when he played Watching Sandy Dance, I mean, that's clearly I'm in love with a stripper. I mean, you can clearly hear that in your mind.
I was thinking
Crystal
milkshake.
Clear. Yeah,
I was thinking the milkshake. Yeah.
Oh, it's interpretive, but you can clearly hear the song.
But yeah, I mean, it gives. It's definitely and dude, I mean, so much happens here where now we can buy, and it's all built in string breaks with Dickhead Ambrose. Why can he keep playing? It's because of what we've read in this chapter. Not that he wouldn't be able to do it anyway, but we immediately can make that connection all the way back to this chapter when we're reading then.
I don't think he would have been able to do it had this not happened. I mean, because when it happens here, he just sits in a fucking stupor, and like when it happened there, like everybody was blown away. Like his buddy, the guy that wants to get him a patron. I'm drawing a blank at his name. Threp. Yeah. Threp is he's like, oh, and I saw you start to try to play it again, and I thought, oh boy, he doesn't understand. You know, my poor boy doesn't understand that he can't play with 6 strings. And he's like, but then you did. So clearly, I think it's pretty clear. Had this not happened, he wouldn't have been able to do it, because no one would be able to do it other than him in that situation.
And there's a further emphasis as well, because it's not just that he attempts playing Wind Turning a Leaf. He spent 3 days trying to capture that sound. And I think he even says, you know, I was a harsh audience. He's only playing for himself, but he's a harsh audience. We already know he has a high standard because he's listened to one of the greatest musicians alive in his father, because that's already been sort of articulated in past chapters. And we already have this respect built for the Rue and how all of them are great performers. So then to be in this, it's so interesting because he's 100% focused at this point, because he's not looking at anything else. It's just survival. And his biggest way to survive, I mean, this makes him go interact with the world, because he lost his strings. So now he has to. For all we know, he would have just stayed in the woods forever.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because he didn't want to leave until the strings broke. And it had to be 2, right? So,
yeah,
or 3. Is it 2? Is it 7 or is it 7?
Once 7. He plays, it starts with 7. He plays with 6. He plays with 5. Once he gets 3 strings break down to 4, he couldn't play with. I also think he was more than just playing those songs. When he gets past the songs, like they make a distinction. Once I played all the songs I knew, and then I played all the songs I half remembered. He's like, then I started doing something other than playing songs. He's like, then I, started playing things. I think at that point he was naming. I don't think he was just playing music. I think through music he was learning how to name. I think the fact that he was behind, kind of had locked his conscious mind behind doors. I think his sleeping mind was kind of running the show, and I think through like playing a leaf turns and the different things like that, I think that he was naming.
I hadn't thought about it that way.
That's really interesting.
There's something to that though, because I don't know. Going back to what Abinthy said to Kvothe's parents about him, no matter what he does, he's going to excel at and be the greatest. When you get a look at, I remember reading this for the first time and thinking, this is an example of that, what Abinthy said, that he's playing like no one else has played before and doing things that no one else has done before. But obviously you don't think of it in that way, that he's learned how to name, but that makes sense.
Yeah, because the way they describe it, he says, I began to play something other than songs. When the sun warms the grass and the breeze cools you, it feels a certain way. I would play until I got the feeling right. I would play until it sounded like warm grass and cool breeze. I don't think he was just playing songs at that point. I mean, there's no clarity to it, but I think that his sleeping mind was kind of running the show, and that he was actually doing at least a form of naming.
Being a fan of music, it's kind of actually great to picture in your mind what wind turning a leaf would sound like.
Yeah.
At least for me. Just picturing what that would be. I don't know what it is, obviously. But it's a cool, I mean, again, Rothfuss picked something that we can all picture in our minds. We've seen it a million times, but it has a gentle, what is that movie? Beautiful Mind, where the dude records leaves just spinning around. Yeah. I don't know. It kind of
plastic bag.
Oh yeah, that's what it is. Plastic bag. Yeah.
But you also see it too, like when he borrows the guy's lute when he first meets Denna, and he's riding to the university, and he borrows that guy's lute to play. He doesn't play like a specific song. It's not like they said, oh, and then I played the Lay of Sir Travian Trailiard, whatever it's called. The Lay of Sir Savian Trailiard. He's like, he doesn't say he played a specific song. He just started playing, and everybody was mesmerized by the song. They were completely wrapped up in this. And so, and then like Denna started bawling as soon as he was done. I think like there's something to like his music. I think it comes into play as far as his naming. I think there's something to his musical ability, that sleeping mind thing, his ability to just start playing and just let the music take him. I think it also is similar to what it takes to be good at naming.
I'm thinking maybe Pat Metheny or Wes Montgomery maybe, or Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
I'm just naming guitar players.
All right. Well, I only knew one of those.
What's his style? I knew you wouldn't know the first two, but I named the first two because they're jazz musicians, and that's kind of the way I pictured it. I mean, I'm only half joking. When he does play that, that's a good example that you selected there, where he's with those strangers at the campfire, and he just plays, and they articulate that, or Rothfuss does, where he just kind of plays how he feels, and kind of what I pictured, because it's not a song, I pictured it as like jazz. But yeah, there's obviously more to it, because people don't listen to some people that are super soft at the end of a song start crying. But I've never been moved to tears personally from a song. Maybe I'm missing out.
No, but that's a complete lie for the audience. I've seen Tim cry at least 37 times from listening to music.
When he listens to music, he cries more than he's listening. Like
he does one of those like things where he doesn't think we realize he's crying. We go, it's like I just the song's kind of good. It's all right. It's not that big a deal.
Dude, mbop is not, that shouldn't be, that does that to everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah, mbop is...
Nobody can listen to Hanson and not get weepy, dude.
Yeah, when I hear, like, the Leia Sir Sabian Trailyard, I think of mbop. Or at least like that, or a Spice Girls song.
Well, I mean, we're talking top, upper echelon here, so, yeah, I mean, those are good comparisons.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the only other... I would also mention this. When he said, like, after he'd stopped playing and he broke the strings, he said, I tried humming Snow Falling with the late autumn leaves, Callous Fingers, and a lute with 4 strings, but it wasn't the same as playing it. I think that's also kind of call back to when he was doing it with the music, that was naming. When he tried humming it, it just wasn't the same thing. Speaking of the tall... the tall have a saying about children of our age. The boys grow upward, but the girls grow up. I was going to bring up the tall in last episode, but I held off because, we're obviously, covered enough. But I think the tall might be the singers that they mention when they talk about the Chandrian fear, the singers, the scythe, and the Amir. Like, who keeps you safe from the singers, scythe, and Amir? I think the tall might be the singers. So we get.
Now, what are you talking about, Dan? You say the tall.
Yeah, so like they say, like in that little part right there, they say the tall, THAL, TAHL. The tall have a saying about children of our age. The boy grows upward, but the girl grows up. There's numerous mentions of the tall. So like one of the big ones is in book 2. That's really the only mention you get in book 1. But in book 2, there's a scene where Simon and Will and Kvothe are hanging out together, and they're talking about where they'd like to go if they had the opportunity. And so Simon goes, where would you go? Simon pursued his point doggedly for adventure. I thought for a moment quietly. I guess I'd go to Tallenwald, I said. Among the tall, Willem asked. They're primitive nomadic people from what I've heard. Technically speaking, the Dimaru are nomadic people, I said dryly. I heard a story once that said the leaders of their tribes are are not great warriors, they're singers. Their songs can heal the sick and make the trees dance. I shrugged. I'd go there and find out if it was true. Then we also get mention of them in his story about the guy with the ass that falls off. Guy with the screw.
Yeah.
He's like, when he's like looking,
I love that
yeah,
story.
it's great. And he went to the Arcanist at the university thinking if anyone would know about the screws and their workings, they would. But the anarchists didn't know. The boy followed the road over the storm wall to ask the witch women of the tall, but none of them could give an answer. And then the only other mention we get of the tall is from Pintha, when Kvothe is asking, when they are talking about like sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, she goes like, if someone gave one to me, she gestured disgust, brushing at the front of her shirt in the first piece of Adim hand talk I'd ever learned from Tempe. Then I would make the long trek over the mountains to the tall and to be cured of it. Even if the trip should take 2 years and bring no money to the school, none would think the least of me for it. And so we get these mentions of the tall, and it's always mentioned that they got these healing powers with singing, and there's mentions of singing and magic associated with them multiple times. So I think that might be who the singers are. Could be not just that it's people singing songs and just minstrels. It could be specifically there's something to do with this magic of Tallenwald, the people of the Tall that have some kind of powers that are dangerous for the Chandrian.
That's interesting. So this ties into the Ilishnots sympathy. I mean, we've kind of touched on all these. Yeah, you like that? I need to dig that one. Sigildry. I mean, it's another access or medium of sympathy, right? Or it could be.
Yeah.
But I hadn't made that connection because we talked about the singer scythes, whatever. I didn't think much about the tall here, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, obviously it's tough to put together just off of that line in the book, but you gotta, and then you gotta just kind of, they're just mentioned in these offhand comments where, like, you gotta really be paying attention and, kind of collect them all and put them all together to kind of think that they even might have significance. What were you gonna say, Fitz?
Well, so I had not put that together, but now that you say that, it brings back to me, my thinking was that the Chandrian didn't like singing, whereas it actually turned out to be that it wasn't the singing, it was the fact that people were saying their names and telling stories about them. It wasn't the singing at all. And from what you're saying, it seems like it's kind of maybe a very quality red herring that Rothfuss has put in there to make you think that it's the singers, and the reason why Kvothe is, doesn't allow singing at the end and so on and so forth, but actually it's not that at all.
Well, no, it could be. It could still be that, but it also could be that the singers have some magical power with the ability to sing. And we get a sense of that with Kvothe, with his musical ability when he's playing music, when he's playing leaf turns and that kind of stuff. It seems magical.
Yeah, I think
so. There could be something magical about singing, and maybe he has some of that in him.
Yeah, I think we actually will get to that in the coming chapters just here, but yeah, he's tapping into that, and I think that's a threat to the Chandrian. And we talked about last episode how it seems like their names being named is the biggest threat to them. That's what it seems, as far as I can tell. That seems to be what Haliax is most fearful of.
Yeah, and it's part of Celatos's curse, is like your name, will torment you or something along those lines. So something to do with their names is obviously a problem, but then the singers, the Scythe and the Emir, there might be something to the singers, and it also might be that Kvothe's seeming magical ability with his music, and that his troop was killed because of the song Arleden was singing. Maybe Arleden maybe he started out with the Tall. Maybe he's a child of the Tall that became a Rue. Maybe he's just got that same type of ability. Maybe he doesn't realize he has that kind of magical power in his songs, or maybe he keeps it close to his vest that he has a little bit of magical ability. But it might be that Arleden has a similar prowess as what the Tall are rumored to have. Could be that as well.
Well, and we get a sense, at least the way that I'm making a connection here, we get a sense of this ability, and I've had it before when I've listened to music where you kind of can be entranced. And Elodin has that. He's not singing, but when he speaks, the whole room just gets like absorbed with this embodiment of what he's doing. Whether it's naming or what it is. So I could see an interconnectedness there, which, I guess that you could see why the Chandrian would be threatened by that.
Yeah, it seems like there might be some kind of magical ability with singing, and Arleden might have had it. Kvothe seems to have some kind of magical ability, at least with playing music on his lute. So, might be something to it. I don't think there's enough to go on in the first two books to really hash it out, but it's something to watch for. I think, I think we'll learn who the singers are in the third book. I don't know if Kvothe's going to go there, but I think we'll have a better idea of why they fear the singers by the third book.
You guys get the sense that the third book's going to have to be like 2,000 pages?
I hope it is.
To sew everything. I'm saying, though.
He says it's going to be shorter.
The story.
He says it's going to be shorter than A Wise Man's Fear.
Sorry to hear that.
It's going to be shorter than 2. All right. Wow.
Yeah. But 2 is super long. It's 1,000 pages. But
yeah.
So I've been reading 2 again, and I just getting into it. I'm like, So because I remember there's so much that happens, and I'm still, I still haven't gotten to, well, whatever. We don't need to go there now, but yeah, he does a lot, man. He better not disappoint us. There better be a lot of Grey Dalsenti, or I'm going to be very disappointed. Yeah. And I want to hear more about Periel's Poontang and how it fits, and I can do it better.
It fits like a glove, man. Fits like a glove.
Just like Fitz. You guys are right.
And then we get, I'd read it before in a previous episode, when he snaps back, when she touches his face and bends to kiss him, he, at this point, like his sleeping mind fully breaks to the forefront. And I think this is a good flashback to, and good evidence towards the fact that when his parents died and the troop was killed, and he went into the woods and he was playing his music by himself, he was playing all these songs, and then like when he's in Tarbean and he was just kind of this animal side to him, this feral state, I think that his sleeping mind was running the show during these moments. And so I think when he was playing his music, he was naming. And I think, when he wasn't using his magic, he wasn't thinking, he wasn't as intelligent. It's because his sleeping mind was in control. It's like rational mind was gone. And so I think we get a good demonstration of that sleeping mind taking over here, because he snaps. He starts thinking about the time where he was almost raped. He breaks a kid's arm, breaks his head, and just goes into a feral state where he's just going crazy on these kids and just completely snaps. And when he's in that state, that's when he looks at Felurian, he sees her. He sees, her name, her true name. And he sees the name of the wind. And when he says her true name, he sings it. He sings out 4 notes. And so it's very similar to the time where he was in the woods singing how a leaf turns and all those kind of things. I think he was naming in that woods. And I think this is a more powerful, more, life is on the line situation. But I do think that gives further evidence that his sleeping mind was in control in those scenes as well.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's it's a different context in the sense that, I mean, if he's naming Felurian, he could kill her, right? So there's a big difference in that aspect. But yeah, I agree with you. I think, and that also accounts for why he didn't play music for money. Why he didn't? I mean, all the different things he could have done. He's a trooper. He could have, acted. He could have. There's all types of things he could have done in Tarbean for money, rather than trying to just scrape by. But if he's in that sleeping mind state for such a long period of time, that would account for the fact that he's not problem solving.
Yeah, and I don't think it's random that Rothfuss reaches back to Tarbean as the moment when his mind breaks. That the first thing he thinks of is a moment in Tarbean, the last time his mind was broken. And so I think that when his mind broke the first time, it was the sleeping mind took over. And this time I think it was the case again, although it didn't, it wasn't such a traumatic experience where, he wasn't coming up because he didn't want to remember his parents dying. But I think it's a demonstration. I don't think it's just a random Rothfuss was like, we'll say, something bad. The memory is something bad in Tarbean, where it could have easily been like a memory of being attacked in, the alley and at the university or something along those lines. I think he specifically chose Tarbean is because that was the last time his sleeping mind was in control.
Yeah. Well, and just for the record, reading this again, it sounds like it wasn't he almost was raped. He was raped.
It could be. I mean, they were holding him down. He ended up knocking them to the ground and scrabbling, my scrabbling hand found a loose cobblestone and I used it to break one of his legs. I remember the noise it made. I flailed until his arms were broken, and then I broke his head. I mean, it could be the case that he got away, but they were definitely trying to.
Yeah, I mean, he got away, but it happened. And then also that again it's pretty fucking vicious, man. Like he breaks a dude's leg, he got his arm broken as well, but then he breaks dude's arms and then breaks his head. I mean, he fucking beat the shit out of this fucking dude.
Yeah.
And bit another person's fingers off.
Yeah. Yeah, so whether they completed the act or not, they had him naked and ready to rape him, and then he whooped the shit out of him. But then he's like, suddenly years later, I was that feral boy again. I jerked my head back and snarled inside my mind. I felt something deep inside myself. I reached for it. That, I mean, again, I was that feral boy again. Mm-hmm. And then this is when he's in control of his sleeping mind. That feral boy his sleeping mind was in control. I think it's almost surely that's the case of what was happening to him in Tarbean. We speculate a lot on that in the early episodes. I think this is the clearest evidence that is exactly what was happening to him, is that his sleeping mind took over. He went behind the doors of madness, or the doors of sleep, or a combination of both, and the sleeping mind took over.
Yeah, I think that's a really reasonable, logical connection.
And then we get, I felt the air begin to crystallize around me. I felt cold, detachedly. I gathered up the pieces of my mind and fit them all together. I was Kvothe the trooper, a Demaru born. I was Kvothe the student, Relar under a Loden. I was Kvothe the musician. I was Kvothe. He's such a dope writer, man.
Yeah.
Like, just the way he fucking puts all that shit.
The part right before that, I thought, is really tremendous. A tense stillness settled inside of me, the sort of silence that comes before a thunderclap. And that was when I felt the air begin to crystallize around me. It's fucking awesome, man. Like he's reaching for this feeling that he has, which is that feeling he had in Tarbean. It's that sleeping mind. And then it all just sort of comes together. And then he rallies, he gives himself that little pep talk. And then he stands above Florian. And you can picture the whole thing. He stands up and he's like, I'm Kvothe.
Yeah.
The fuck are you?
Yeah. And he's like, I felt as if this was the only time in my life I had been fully awake. Everything looked clear and sharp, as if I was seeing with a new set of eyes, as if I wasn't bothering with my eyes at all, and was looking at the world directly with my mind, the sleeping mind. Some piece of me realized faintly, no longer sleeping, I thought, and smiled. So that's another aspect of it, too. It's like he's a kid in Tarbean dealing with trauma. So he's like kind of, locked some of his mind behind this, the doors of sleep or the doors of madness, but is still in that kind of feral state where the sleeping mind is awake. Maybe it's not, perfectly accurate to say the sleeping mind was awake, but it was a sleeping mind-esque state where maybe he didn't fully, it was very unconscious, whereas this is a scenario where he's very conscious of his sleeping mind taking control and the power that it grants him. I don't think he fully grasped what was going on to him in Tarbean. I think that's one of the main differences.
And a big part of the difference also, he knew how to break his mind up into different pieces, but he hadn't trained to utilize those pieces in such a way as he now has all that training.
Yeah, and he hadn't called the name of the wind and trained with the Loden and all their jackassery, and so it's a different experience now that he's older and he knows what's happening.
Yeah, he's got perspective, which he didn't have before. I mean, what he was basically, he was shocked into that state, right? And then it was just sort of a kill or be killed scenario. In this sense, it's a kill or be killed scenario, but he has weapons of his mind. He's kind of, he's been rallying. He's been rallying for the last 2 chapters, right? I mean, he's depriving himself to be able to make sure that he can get out of this.
Yeah.
So now he's in that rallying state, and now he's also accessing what he needs to access. Which, by the way, just the visuals of it are pretty insane to consider. He's in this Nirvana-like place, right? With this the most beautiful woman in the world laying on silks and all this shit, and he's picturing one of the worst moments he's ever lived through in his entire life. Probably the second worst moment that happened to him in his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
To fuel the fire.
Yeah, it's nuts. And then and this is another thing, how do you recreate this on a TV show? Just because so much of it is just happening in his mind. And so, I mean, you could
Flashback,
as cool as some of the phrasing and the sentences, he's He's like, I looked at Felurian, and in that moment, I understood her down to the bottoms of her feet. She was of the Fae. She did not worry over right or wrong. She was a creature of pure desire, much like a child. A child does not concern itself with consequence. Neither does a sudden storm. Felurian resembled both, and neither. She was ancient and innocent and powerful and proud. Was this the way Elodin saw the world? Was this the magic he spoke of? Not secrets or tricks, but Tamerlane the great magic, always there, but beyond my seeing until now. It was beautiful. You can describe that in words, where he's like seeing the world with this new vibrancy, and like he's seeing it down to its essence. He's seeing the molecules and the atoms, and he understands how everything works together. And he's seeing the world with eyes that you can't see. It's like he's having a freaking DMT trip or something, where he's like seeing another plane of existence. And how do you do that on its, visually, through a television show, unless you have like a narrator? So you lose like a little bit of that aspect of this, the beauty of so much of what makes this book and these books unique and different is his writing style, his prose. And you don't have prose in a TV show.
Yeah.
So you're going to lose that aspect of it. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, one of the strongest parts of this is the prose, and you're going to lose that.
I mean, the one of the things that does kind of come to mind, because you're bringing it up, how do you do it, is I'm picturing like, the green binary codes of the Matrix, where they're seeing what holds it all together. It's not beautiful,
No.
It doesn't paint that picture, but it is something that did work for the film, right? It did work in that sense, because we could see sort of what they were going for.
And if it worked with the Matrix, it will work in anything else. So you just redo it. You just do it the exact same thing, just ones and zeros, green ones and zeros.
So be like, oh, so that's what this is.
I take back my concern, and you can do it easly. The Matrix did it, so there, it's problem solved. So we can move on from that. But yeah, then he's like, I met Felurian's eyes, and the world grew slow and sluggish. I felt as if I had been thrust underwater, as if my breath had been pressed from my body. For that tiny moment, I was stunned and numb, as if I had been struck by lightning. And so he starts like seeing her true name. It like thrust him underwater. It felt like it was too much. It was too much when he saw it. And then he's like, the moment passed and things began to move again. But now, looking into Felurian's twilight eyes, I understood her far beyond the bottoms of her feet. Now I knew her to the marrow of her bones. Her eyes were like 4 lines of music clearly penned. My mind was filled with the sudden song of her. I drew a breath and sang it out in 4 hard notes. Like, that's singing magic. And it's different. Like, even when he talks about the name of the wind here, he doesn't talk about like he sung out notes for the name of the wind. He saw the name of the wind and he spoke a name. He just spoke a name. But with Felurian, it's like her name is much more complex. Like Elodin talks about, one of the complexities, and one of his reasons he was able to see her name, where Elodin was like, it's pretty impressive that you could speak someone's true name. And he's like, he probably, had you known how difficult it is, you probably wouldn't have been able to do it. And I think one of the reasons he was able to do it is because it was like a musical thing to him. He saw it as music. And I think that is a callback to the time in the woods when he was playing, like How a Leaf Turns. I think he's practiced these things and seeing the true names of things in his music. And so when he saw her true name, he saw it in a musical aspect, and then he sang out the 4 notes. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're getting Tarbean, the feral child, and then when he sees Felurian's name, he sings it out, and it's like he struck these 4 chords. And so I think it is a callback to the preparation that was done while he was in a feral state as a kid after his parents were killed.
So that's interesting. So the first few parts that you mentioned gets him to the place where he can even be in the state of being able to access her name.
Yeah.
But when he sees it, it would be something that a musician can interpret. Because the way he sees it, her eyes were like 4 lines of music, clearly penned. So he's able to interpret that, and basically what you're getting at is many would not be. Like, well, what Elodin says, it would be nearly impossible. If you knew how hard it was, you wouldn't even likely be able to do it. But with his background, that's the thing. He's got the makeup for it.
Yeah, 100%. It was like, it was like Rothfuss was Mr. Miyagi, training Kvothe during, when his parents died, putting him through the training of in the woods, playing the music in that feral state, so that when this moment came around, all that stuff that he went through in his youth and all that practice and everything, it all came to fruition here. And he was able to use it to call the name of, one of the most famous figures in the world in Felurian. And he was able to call her name and control her because of what happened to him as a kid.
I remember being actually, even this time around, I was actually in a way surprised because he just goes right at it. He sees it and calls it. He doesn't just hold it. You know what I'm saying? Like hold it hostage. Like you would think, I mean, whenever I hear about, if somebody has your name, you would think they would not necessarily just call it out the second they see it. Of course, that's kind of Kavo's move. Definitely fits his thing, but also the situation he's in, obviously.
And there's a line too, like, cause he calls her name and then he doesn't gain mastery over yet. And then it was like there was a pain like thunder in my head. Darkness flickered at the edges of my sight. I tasted blood and bitter rue. Like, it's too much. It was like too much to control her. This is part of the difficulty. Or like, is this something that she's doing? Is it her fighting back is what he's feeling?
Yeah, it seems like she claps back, right? Because she passed her hand before her eyes and spoke. She sat upright. Then she passed her hand before her eyes and spoke a word as sharp as shattered glass. And then there was a pain like thunder in my head. So it seemed like, that what she did was a reaction. And it's like a knee-jerk, immediate reaction to being basically attacked. Yeah. That's the way I saw it. That she claps back and, but.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, that could be exactly what it was. But it seems like that's likely what's going on is like she's pushing back against not even necessarily like pushing back like she's trying to hurt him or something. It was almost just like this is just when you're pressing against her, calling her name, like she starts speaking a name and fighting against that without even necessarily and not even necessarily doing it as a she's trying to harm him or something along those lines. It's like a reaction.
Yeah, I think it's self-defense. I think every individual creature, whatever, is like when you're threatened, man, you have a natural inclination
but
in your being to fight back or defend yourself.
But her like power is like to make you feel passion towards her. So I don't even think she was like trying to like fight back. Like, he's trying to kill me. I got to fucking kill him. Cause then she's like, she takes a step towards him. And, another step, her smile was fierce and full. She was as lovely as the moon. Her power hung about her like a mantle. It shook the air. It spread behind her like a pair of vast and unseen wings. So she's fighting back with this magical power, but the magical power is like this overwhelming desire for her where you lose your frickin' mind and you have no control over your own thoughts anymore. It is the power that she exudes.
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking, I mean, if she had a pole there, she'd be spinning on it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's her weapon.
She's swinging between poles, going from one to one. If she walked into a restaurant and swung on a pole, she's getting a standing ovation for sure.
Well, it's that, she elevates it, man. That's what it sounds like.
But then, she met my eyes, and in the twilight written there, I saw again the 4 clear lines of song. I sang them out. They burst from me like birds into the open air. So he names her again, and then suddenly my mind was clear again. I drew a breath and held her eyes in mine. I sang again, and this time I was full of rage. I shouted out the 4 hard notes of song. I sang them tight and white and hard as iron. And at the sound of them, I felt her power shake, then shatter, leaving nothing in the empty air but ache and anger. So this time, the third time he says her name, it breaks her power. He overpowers her at that point. And Felurian gave a startled cry and sat so suddenly that it was almost like a fall. She curled her knees towards herself and huddled, watching me with wide and frightened eyes. Comes like a child. She's like completely in his control now. And she's like, oh shit, did I bring in here?
Yeah, I mean, and what is she used to doing? She's used to owning everybody that comes in.
Yeah, and then she's like,
until they die. Now she's owned.
Yeah, and she's probably, there's probably like 5 people she's met in her entire existence that have that kind of power that could name her. Yeah. When she is, using her power to fight back, and he's able to use his power to overpower her. There's probably not many people in the entire history of the world who would be able to do that to her. And Kvothe does it. And again, I don't think it's unearned. I think a lot of people talk about like, oh yeah, then he's, got the power to name her. I think Rothfuss laid the tracks with what happened in, his childhood in Tarbean for this very moment. And I think that's why he calls back to those moments, and that that he sings her name. And it's not just that he says her name, he sings it. I think it's a callback to, the preparation that he already put in the books. But it's just, he hides these things.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I agree with you 100%. He's giving the evidence as he's delivering it. I mean, he's telling you why these things are possible. You know what I mean? It's not out of the blue. Yeah, her name is out of the blue, but that's how naming works. That's how the sleeping mind works. That it's those dark, intense moments. He's fighting for his life. You know? So and then and on top of it, we're getting delivered again one of the probably the second worst moment in his entire life, which we weren't actually even aware of in full capacity. So I mean, it's not like it just happened out of the clear blue sky.
No, not at all. But yeah, and then he calls the name of the wind. He's like, I laughed and spread my arms, marveling at its shifting shape. I cupped my hands and breathed a sigh into the hollow space within. I spoke a name. Again, he spoke a name that time. It's not he sang out, and I think that demonstrating how complex Felurian's name is. And, it makes clear that I think Elodin is accurate when he's like, you spoke Felurian's name. That's what happened. But he's like, I moved my hands and wove my breath gossamer thin. It billowed out, engulfing her, then burst into a silver flame that trapped her tight inside its changing name. Now that you could probably make a cool visual imagery of him picking her up with the wind, and it's like a silver flame going around her as she's kind of trapped and held within it. He has full control over her. He's like, I knew that I could kill her. It would be as simple as throwing a sheet of paper to the wind, but the thought sickened me, and I was reminded of ripping the wings from a butterfly. Killing her would be destroying something strange and wonderful. A world without Felurian was a poorer world. A world I would like a little less. It would be like breaking Ilian's loot. It would be like burning down a library in addition to ending a life. So I like the callbacks there, like the ripping the wings from a butterfly, which is what the Kvothe does.
Yeah.
Then also a world without Felurian would be a poor world. A world I would like a little less. It would be like breaking Ilian's loot. So maybe Ilian's loot gets broken. Also a world like burning down a library, which the burning a Calatina, which I would bet money that the Emir did that. And so I think, those lines might stand out even more once we know the third book, but those are interesting that he mentioned, especially like the pulling the wings off a butterfly, given the Kvothe comes up in these chapters.
What if Kvothe ends up burning down the library while ending a life?
And breaking Ilian's loot.
Yeah, maybe he does all those things.
Pulling a butterfly, his wings off, all at the same exact time.
Okay. Well, that clearly is a callback to the Kvothe, but the reason why I bring it up is, what would be... So if the doors of stone are at the library, if that the 4-plate door we know is at the library, something behind the 4-plate door, and what goes down goes down. Some of the most painful things for Kvothe to have to endure, one would be burning the library. That'd be a horrific blow to the world.
Yeah, it could be that he accidentally burns down the library of the university. What a fucking loss.
In addition to ending a life. So ending a life and what I do hope is that Lauren...
I was gonna say... I was waiting for you to finish, because I was going to be like, and then you will see like Lauren being like, I knew it.
I knew I should have never let you in here. I told Elodin that if I let him back in, he would burn this place down. But no one ever listens to me.
He's actually screaming.
Yeah.
That's what it. I mean, shit. If he can't scream, then man.
And then he starts laughing like maniacally, like he starts laughing from being so angry, and laughing at the how the I told you of it. And then Kvothe is like, "Pay me, whoever made that bet. I made him laugh right there. Now you owe me money." I think his Mandrake's got the standing offer if you can make him laugh.
I forgot all about that. Yeah. Maybe that would be the thing that. Yeah, maybe that would be the thing that breaks him. He goes into like a like you said, maniacal, like crazy person laugh.
Yeah, it like completely breaks him. But and then so he's like, on the other hand, my safety and sanity were at stake. I believe the world was more interesting with Kvothe in it as well. I love that little line there. It's fun, funny little line. It's like, on the other hand, I'm pretty dope too. And I would rather be alive than not. And so, but he spoke again. The wind brought her down among the pillows. I made a tearing motion, and the silver flame that had once been my breath became 3 notes of broken song and went to play among the trees. So he sets her free, and then she sat and she's looking at him in like going from fear to caution to curiosity. She's like, what the fuck did I let in here? And not only is this dude like a sweet poet, but this dude's got crazy power. And he's legit dangerous. And then he starts to feel it fade. And he's like, forgetting, I realized the name of the wind no longer filled my mouth. When I looked around, I saw nothing but empty air. I tried to remain outwardly calm, but as these things left me, I felt like a lute whose strings were being cut. My heart clenched with a loss I hadn't felt since my parents died. It's a pretty intense loss right there.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a way to describe it.
Yeah, that was a little bit surprising to me. Like I forgot about how intense that really is, which kind of makes me feel like, well, it makes me remember back when you would, the drug days, the crazier the drug is, the like further it goes, the bigger the drawback, the bigger the fucking
come down
recovery. Yeah, the hangover, the recovery, the come down. Yeah. So it kind of resembled that to me to a degree. But he also visited a fucking awful place. So there's also that. I mean, a lot going on in old Duder's brain here, man.
Yeah, I mean, and the impetus of this was a flashback to his time in Tarbean, almost getting raped, and right after his parents died and all that kind of shit. So yeah, it's swelling up some bad memories, and he's losing the power, and now he's back at Felurian's mercy again. So it'd be scary, and it's an extremely intense moment that he goes through. Like, I don't care what else happened in the Fae. Just these opening couple of chapters would be like, the Fae's fucking dope. Like, did you not read this chapter when he fought Felurian? Like, that's fucking dope. I don't know how you read that as a fantasy fan and you're not like, it's fucking dope. What are you talking about?